We use medical astrology as part of profiling a patient. So, of course, when I profile a patient, we're going to look at, the classic medical history, the pharmacological history. We're going to use labs to determine the biochemistry. We're going to look at, blood, stool, urine, saliva, hair, to really assess the markers that determine health, looking at gut dysbiosis, the whole microbiome, hormones, neurotransmitters, and of course minerals. So we use all of these things to help profile the patient, as well as using medical astrology. So we live in very fascinating times because we're coming upon the end of cycles. We're leaving the Iron Age, going into the Bronze Age. This is why we need to know about the metal of copper, because she will be the leading lady in this epoch. We're also going from the Piscean Age to the Aquarian Age. So Aquarius is an air sign. So we need to understand the essence of the air element. Aquarius is also ruled by the planet Saturn and Uranus. And so Uranus we need to take a little look at. Uranus is typically considered a higher octave of Mercury. It has these several features. It's it's very fast, it's quick, it has to do with supermind. Uranus is the planet of brain power, high faculties, abstraction, super fast intelligence, it's lateral thinking. Uranus rules electricity, waves, radio communication, electronics, computers. Artificial intelligence is a typical Uranus concept. Uranus is also the planet of aviation and flight and all possible forms, space to astral traveling. So it's a very interesting planet as we're entering, the age of Aquarius, ruled by Saturn and Uranus. Saturn is the furthest from the Earth. It's the furthest from the Sun. So it gives us these themes of distance and isolation. And because it's the furthest from the Sun, it's like one of the colder planets in our solar system. And so it's got that cold, slow, dark energy. In fact, Saturn is the skin of our solar system, and that's why it's co-ruler of the skin. Saturn energy is the organizer, it's the builder, it's the brick and mortar of our body, giving us our bones and teeth. So it's very orderly, there's integrity with Sagittarians, there's endurance and fortitude. There's, establishing order. That's why they make good judges, good librarians, good policemen. It's cold and slow and contracting and hardening. Those are the same themes. And this is why we must keep an eye on calcium, because Saturn rules the mineralization, and keeping calcium in solution is based on the mineral system. And so when we think of death, we think of rigor mortis, and so we know that magnesium is the spark of the sun, and when we die, that spark of the sun is no longer there to modulate calcium, because calcium contracts, magnesium relaxes. Then when the spark is no longer there, all the calcium channels are released, and we know that calcium causes the contraction. In rigor mortis, it's a full-blown contraction, and so that represents death. That's the essence of this Saturn theme. So Saturn disorders, it's aging diseases, and just think of all hardening diseases: arterial sclerosis, scar tissue, cirrhosis, stiffness, tooth decay. Think about, the stones, the gallstones, the kidney stones, a lot of just joint diseases. There's also lead poisoning, and, mineral deposition disease would kind of be the hallmark, because the mineral deposition diseases is what gets us all in the end. I did a recent case study of a patient in a 4-low pattern and with a lead toxicity. And we're going to see how that pertains to the planet Saturn. And that's what makes medical astrology fascinating. Now, in order to understand astrology, one must learn it for oneself. So astrology gets a lot of bad rap. It's been hijacked, it's been marginalized, it's been delegated to the funny papers, it's been ridiculed. since the beginning of time, really. It's been corrupted. But like I said, the sky clock above is incorruptible. It's, it really is the true royal science. And when we give it a deep understanding and we really expand and start to understand and study astrological energies and studying the planets and the solar systems and cycles of time, then we start to get a deeper appreciation for this royal science. Also, when we're talking about astrology, we must understand we have tropical zodiac astrology, we have sidereal astrology, Vedic astrology, we got the lunar calendars. So we got many different disciplines of astrology. We need to know how to integrate and put these together to give us the fuller picture of astrology, of the great royal science. Now, coming back to my patient who was in the 4 low with lead toxicity, she was born in the sign of Capricorn and on Saturday. So both of those are significant because they're both ruled by the planet Saturn. And so just like from a Vedic astrology point of view, we have the 7 days of the week, just as we have the 7 visible orbs to the naked eye, the 7 colors in the rainbow, the 7 verses in the Lord's Prayer, the 7 chakras, the 7 endocrine glands, the 7 layers of skin. And we know God's favorite number is 7 because the world was created in the 7 days. So 7 is very significant when we look at it from a numerological point of view, tying it into astrology, because you have to integrate the divination arts of astrology, numerology, the tarot, and Kabbalah. And these are the 4 divination arts in the Western sciences. Now, in the Vedic tradition, the day that you're born on determines your constitutional strengths and weaknesses. It has to do with psychology, your genetic makeup. It's your true constitutional strength or your weakness. And so that's why knowing the day of the week that you're born on is very important. Quickly, I'll review the 7 cycles that we go through. So when we're born, it's ruled by the moon. That's birth to the first 7 years of life. So what do we do in the first year of life? We sleep. The moon governs the sleep cycles. It's the pineal gland. And so also the breasts are ruled by the moon, and that's the baby gets its nourishment from the mother's milk. That's that, Cancer connection. That's Cancer is ruled by the moon. And so the baby's first cycle, the first 0 to 7 is the moon energy. Then we move into as a child develops, when he hits 7 years of age, Curious George comes online, communication, wanting to see the world and wanting to, start to get their voice as they learn to speak and interact. And that's where we also get a lot of throat infections, ear infections, all this, the mouth, nose, sinuses, all are becoming inflamed as we're integrating the themes of life in the, Curious Mercury years. Then we go into the Venus cycle, which begins at age 14 to 21. So Venus is ruled by the metal copper, and we go through the hormone changes. And we know copper is the most emotional mineral on the periodic table. And during these crazy puberty hormonal years, that's when you see a lot of craziness in those crazy teenage cycles that we go through. We all have to deal with relationships, understanding our sexuality, and it's all governed by copper, the copper energy. So we have the timeline of copper, which, you're going to see a lot of growth, whether it's we start growing in puberty, our bones are growing. We know copper helps in that department. And a lot of other growth, so we have a copper timeline during pregnancy because that promotes the growth. It's intimately related to the estrogens, and estrogens promote growth. And we can also have, when we have too much copper, that keeps the estrogens high, and that can cause fibroid growth, cyst growth, acne growth, cancer growth. So this is why we got to keep an eye on these metals, especially copper and iron, Mars and Venus, Aries and Libra. So we always see the polarity in these dialects. So the Venus years, 14 to 21. Then we go through 3 7-year sun cycles. That's a 21-year cycle from ages 21 to 42. That's where we find our path, our passions, the things we love doing. We tend to fall in love in those age periods. And we have to, follow the sun, as the Beatles once said. And sun has 3 elements. And those three elements are hydrogen is the neutral element of the sun, and then we have the masculine gold energy of the sun, and the feminine magnetic energy is magnesium. The feminine bursts life, and capturing the essence of the sun through photosynthesis happens via the metal magnesium. It's the magnetic energy that bursts the whole entire food chain that feeds the planet, that mother feeding energy. And so we look at the porphyrin ring, and our red blood cells is red because of iron, and the chlorophyll of a plant is green because of the mineral magnesium. So it captures the essence of the sun. So those 3 7-year cycles of the sun. Then we go into Mars. Mars is age 42 to 49. Of course, the metal of Mars is iron, and the higher octave of Mars is zinc. So iron is the physical warrior, and zinc is the spiritual warrior. And so when we're in the Mars phase, have we transmuted the iron energy more into the spiritual warrior? And when we haven't, then we become anemic. When we have not fought for the things in life that we want, when we become the doormat and get walked over, that's when that Mars energy, the anemic force, is flowing through us in a very negative way. Then the flip side to that is then too much Mars energy, we become very aggressive and angry, and then the iron oxidizes, causing a lot of high blood pressure and inflammation, and as well as arthritis. And you start to see these signs when the blood of the iron gets convoluted, because we haven't found that real spiritual warrior, the higher octave of that Mars energy. And that brings us to the Jupiterian energy. As we enter the Jupiter cycle, ages 49 to 56. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. It's associated with, growth and expansion and opportunity. It's wisdom. The knock on wood is a Jupiterian expression of good fortune. So there's, the energy of Jupiter, that when we're in that age cycle of the Jupiterian energy, that's growth and expansion. Hopefully our minds are growing and continuing growing and expanding, but when that energy gets stagnant and stuck, we grow and expand around our waistline, because that's the age when we put on the most weight. And we know that Jupiter is the liver. The largest internal organ in us is the liver. The largest planet in our solar system is Jupiter. So the liver is the general, because it does everything, just as Jupiter is the general. It's Zeus, it's Jesus, it's Jesus. So we start to see the energy of Jupiter. And when we're in these cycles, we can prepare for, liver diseases, blood sugar stuff, diabetes, digestive disorders, the gas and the bloating, the hemorrhoids, hepatitis stuff, indigestion, intestinal diseases, jaundice, obesity, thyroid diseases, weight gain, and just overall weak digestion. So we got to understand this very important liver Jupiterian energy. Then the final cycle that we go into is, of course, the Saturn cycle, which begins at 56 years to 63. And I'm currently in my Saturn cycle, so I know that I've had teeth issues my whole life, and so when I enter this cycle, I know I have some old tooth stuff that I have to be careful of. And of course, during the cycle, I had a tooth extracted. An old filling came out, old mercury filling fell out, and I had to get the tooth pulled. So this is the time to look out for a lot of bone type of stuff, teeth type of stuff. Saturn is just aging, and so our goal is to slow down the premature aging. And to slow down premature aging, we need to know about calcium metabolism. So we all agree on the 7 days of the week, and Monday is the moon, Tuesday is Mars. And what do we do on Tuesdays? We vote on Tuesdays, presidential speeches on Tuesday, declarations of war on Tuesday, and of course, the infamous 9/11 on Tuesday, because Mars is the day of war. And so Wednesday is Mercury, Thursday is Jupiter. We have Thanksgiving on Jupiter, having everything to do with digestion and the liver and that growth and expansion on Thanksgiving. So Thursday represents the Jupiterian energy. We love Fridays because Friday is the day of love. That's the day of Venus. That's the metal of copper. And so we also have Saturday is Saturn. The Jews worship on Saturn's day, and the Christians worship on the Sun day. So those are the 7 days of the week, and the day of the week you were born determines your constitutional genetic profile makeup. And that's why looking at what day of the week you were born on, looking at your sun sign, and then you can go deeper into, finding out what planets are dominating in certain aspects of your chart. So my patient in the 4-low with lead toxicity, and knowing that she's a Capricorn, knowing that she's born on a Saturday, tells me a lot about the Saturn type of energy that we're dealing with in her 4-low pattern. And when a patient's in a 4-low pattern, it has everything to do with calcium metabolism. And the flip side to that, we see the calcium shell, which is, we put up the wall, and that's that calcium wall that is, the calcification of the body. So whether we're in the 4-low pattern, which is referred to as the tunnel of death, because if we don't fix the minerals, we're going to stay in that tunnel. And on the flip side, if we have that calcium shell, we are in premature aging. And so this is how we can look at calcium metabolism, connecting it to the energy of Saturn, as well as we can see that the themes. Okay, so maybe when someone's in a 4-low or in a shell pattern, we have to look at, are we addressing the themes of Saturn? Maybe we have to look at where we become too rigid in life. So we have the order and structure, which is very important, but when we become too rigid, too structured, we lose the flexibility. Maybe in our relationships we become too cold. We're not letting the sun energy permeate into us, and we put up that wall, and we just become cold and distant in our relationships. Maybe we have themes of fears of death. So maybe we need to integrate and understand the great cycles of life and death. So we have to be able to integrate these themes into us, because they become very important in understanding about medical astrology. When we see certain hair tissue patterns, such as the 4-low or the calcium shell, we know that we're going to help move the patient forward, but part of it is understanding the underlying themes. And this is where we get the deeper understanding. So we're in a 4-low pattern. We know there's a Saturn theme. So maybe we have to address the Saturn themes that have caused energetically the imprint of a 4-low pattern. Now, also, when we're talking about Saturn, the quintessence of the Saturn energy is lead, the metal lead. We know lead displaces calcium, lead displaces zinc, magnesium. It's really enemy agent number one. It's the metal, it's the death metal. There's nothing more deadening than lead. It's an extremely poor conductor of electricity. It blocks all kinds of energy transmission. It just dampens the energy. Lead, they put it in, a lot of soundproofing and, high-rise buildings and home, stuff, to deaden the sound. That's that energy of lead. When you go to the dentist's office, they put those lead aprons on you because lead shields light. It blocks the radiation. So lead reacts with more chemicals than any other metal. However, instead of producing something new and useful, lead kills. It combines substances and makes them inert. insoluble, and unable to enter into further chemical reactions. And the salts precipitate out of solution, becoming our deposition diseases, whether it's lead in the brain causing the mental depressions, if it's in a child, the low IQ, the mental retardation. Lead can get into the bones, and we know Saturn takes about 30 years to rotate around the sun. If you have lead in deep bones or the brain, when you do a mineral balancing program, you're not going to remove deep lead in the bones. It takes time, so we have to understand how to have patience when doing a mineral balancing detoxification developmental program. Classically, some of the signs and symptoms of lead poisoning, which is known as Saturnism, is a lack of energy. That's like the classic, no energy. Remember I said that lead blocks the zinc. You need the zinc to help make your red blood cells. So in the porphyrin ring of making our blood cells, the zinc-dependent enzyme gets displaced by the lead. So we see that lack of energy, and just, we see the depression, we see headaches, we see a lot of, brain damage, attention deficit disorders, learning disabilities, a lot of antisocial behavior and anger. A lot of cramping of the body, a lot of growth of connective tissues resulting in a rigid appearance, rapid aging and early death are all signs and symptoms of lead. Now, when we think about it, what metal has killed more than any other on the periodic table? Of course, that would be lead. So think of all the lead bullets, the lead paints, the lead gasolines. Lead is PB, that's the plum, that's the plumber. In ancient Rome, they ran their water system through lead pipes. So the lead energy would be transmitted into the most life-giving element, water, and then the water would carry the death energy of Saturn into us. So when we're struggling with Saturn themes, whether it's fears of death, whether it's depression, whether it's bone stuff, blood stuff, spleen, the red blood cells, whether it's the gallstones, kidney stones, we have homeopathic remedies to help us get through some of these healing crises that we may come across during a developmental program. Some Saturn homeopathics such as aluminum, arsenicum, boreticarb, cadmium, calcium carbonate, calcium fluoride, calc phos, carcinosum, causticum, colchicum, graphites, Hecla lava, kali-carb, petroleum, plumbum, sorianum, radium brome, Sakali, silica, strontium carb, sulfur, tellurium, thiosanamine are some of the homeopathic remedies to help us address some of these Saturn themes. This is how I kind of use, in a very quick nutshell, of medical astrology. As we reviewed lead and the 4-lobe pattern, we start to understand how we can really move a case when we start to profile a patient using all the tools, not just having myopia and just looking at the chemistry. We also have to look at the energetics, because healing has been and always will be an art and a science. So I hope you enjoyed this quick talk on medical astrology, and thank you for listening.